We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another F1 Fantasy video. And of course, this is going to be for the Dutch Grand Prix, which is in only a few days. The summer break was long enough, but to be fair, I'll give it credit. It's nice to have had a few weeks off to refresh from all of the F1 Fantasy, because obviously we've had a triple header. We've got a few triple headers coming up as well. So a lot more F1 Fantasy to come this weekend. But anyway, in the global leagues, here is my standing right now. Last race weekend wasn't too bad. Of course, I got very lucky. Don't worry, I won't be going anywhere near the team that I picked for Spa, basically. Spoilers. Like and subscribe if you like what you see. Join my Discord if you want to have some more chats about F1 Fantasy. Follow my Twitter if you want more updates on my F1 Fantasy teams and just my channel in general. And hey, let's get straight into it. So first off, let's talk about 2 premium drivers versus 1 premium driver builds, because in Spa that was a lot of debate, with Verstappen looking really good with his penalties, even Norris potentially being able to push through the field, and we didn't really see that. But the main thing is, the 2 premium driver build still looks like the best option for now. Now, like I said, it's been up for debate, but with the most recent races, Russell's been extremely unlucky, and Mercedes in general have been extremely unlucky. And normally you would have a McLaren Mercedes with 2 premium driver builds. They would have normally have done better, so I still think the trend is moving towards the 2 premium driver builds. And hey, there's even some people potentially soon who could be bringing in 3 premium driver builds if they keep on increasing their team value the way they are. But that's still a little bit into the future. But for me, definitely still 2 premium driver builds with such as Norris, Hamilton, Russell, Norris, Piastri, Russell. All of those teams are still better than having just 1 single premium driver build. Again, it sort of spreads out being able to get driver of the day and fastest lap on your team, but also it just has been a trend that they've been getting more points. I do mention that it has to be said that obviously we are going into Max's home Grand Prix, and Max has never let down his home crowd. Since 2021, since Zandvoort got put back onto the F1 calendar, Max has always won this race. So don't count out Max Verstappen, but I just think that we've seen when Max Verstappen wins a race, he doesn't get driver of the day. There's not enough points for him in it. Even if he comes first, there's still better points available for the Hamiltons, for the Norrises who come second, third or fourth, if that happens. Red Bull as a constructor, a little bit different, because if Verstappen does do well, they'll probably get fastest pit stop points, and then it's hard. Again, no, this is moving more into a single premium driver build. If you can afford to have Verstappen plus another premium driver build with McLaren and Mercedes, then you're sitting pretty. But for most of us, this just isn't the case. So yes, this weekend, Verstappen does probably look like the best single premium driver option. I mean, even in Spa, he had a lot of pace. He would have won that race without the penalty. The thing is, if you have a team that can afford McLaren, Red Bull and Verstappen, that also means you can afford a 2 premium driver build most likely, which will always get you more points. And also, it kind of shoots yourself in the foot, because if you have a Red Bull as a constructor or Verstappen as your driver, you're really limiting how much your budget can increase. That's the great thing about having Mercedes assets. Yeah, they're a little bit flip-flop these days, but when they perform, they get you those 1 million increases to their price. Now, we also need to talk about the premium drivers with McLaren versus Mercedes, because I think this is one of the first weekends for a while that we can adamantly say Norris potentially isn't a must. Now, Norris has normally been my go-to guy for getting driver of the day and fastest lap, but he's just not delivering anymore. Now, after the break, maybe he'll come back and perform, because he is due a good race. But Piastri, who is cheaper, who could get you more money, has been getting more points than him. Hamilton's been getting more points than him. Russell, without getting unlucky, would have been getting more points than him. So there's a lot of trends with a lot of drivers under 25 million who could be doing better than Norris. So potentially it's time to look away. For me, it depends where your team is looking. Like, I'll most likely still have Norris in my team because I need to focus on different areas of my team. But if you could bring in a team with Hamilton, Russell, Hamilton, Piastri, potentially that could be better budget-wise and points-wise. But now let's actually talk about some of the drivers themselves. So let's talk about the top driver under 8 million. So there's only 3 of them. There are Sargent, Bottas and Zhou. And for me, it has to be Logan Sargent as the best driver. I know, absolutely crazy, because I keep on saying he's such a bad driver. And bear in mind, all 3 of these drivers are bad. And that's the reason why Sargent is the better option though. Because in a race where none of them crash out, they get less than 4 points. Since Silverstone, none of them have got more than 4 points. That's just not enough points to go from that jump from Sargent up to a Bottas or Zhou, which is like 2.5 to 3 million increase. And that money could be spent better elsewhere. And that's why I say Sargent is the best, because he's so cheap. You know what you're getting with him. He's giving you no points, but that money will be better put to use to have better premium drivers, better constructors. And that's why I have Logan Sargent as my favourite driver under 8 million. He's not good, but guess what? The other two aren't good as well. All about just getting the cheapest ones, because they're not going to score you many points. You've got to be strategical about it. Then you have the top 3 drivers under 12 million. Again, the top dog still has to be Kevin Magnussen. He can always pull something out of the bag. It doesn't even matter. Normally it's qualify well and stay there, or qualify badly and push up the field. But with Kevin Magnussen, it doesn't matter where he is. He'll always get overtake points. He'll always get race position gains points. He is such a good asset to have in F1 Fantasy. It's a shame he's so expensive. He's the most expensive cheap driver out there, but still, there's a reason he's the most expensive cheap driver out there. Then in second place, you actually have Esteban Ocon. He's actually been wrapping up a lot of fantasy points the last few weekends. Now, I've always been a little bit not keen about him because I think Gasly's a similar option and for a lot less money. But with Gasly's issues so far this season, I'm starting to understand why Ocon is a decent choice. Yes, again, he's quite expensive, but the proof's in the pudding. He hasn't put a foot wrong for the last 3 or 4 weekends, and I can't actually not have him in this top 3 list. And then funnily, if I say it's a top 3 list, it's technically a top 4 list, because third place is a joint position, and that is Albon and Hulkenberg. Because yes, those two get you decent points. They've been doing it for the last few weekends, especially Hulkenberg, but these are the cheap drivers, sort of, after that 8 million. These are the drivers that will get you the most points with the cheapest value for a cheap driver that you're going to get decent points from, and that's why they are my third favourite. Albon a little bit less, but he's so much cheaper than the rest of the cheap drivers that you can't not discuss him, because yes, he gets around 5 to 6 points, which is good enough to have in your team. It's the same amount of points as a Ricciardo or Tsunoda will give you, and it's a lot cheaper. And then Hulkenberg again in that Haas, he normally has a few decent weekends and then pulls out a massive weekend where he'll qualify well or just get you a lot of points. And then you have all of the top drivers under 27 million, so this is only excluding basically Max Verstappen, and it stayed the same. Again, I wouldn't go near Ferrari assets for now. Even if they bring upgrades, it's just too early to be talking about that. That's why I'll talk about them a bit more in my practice debriefs for F1 Fantasy, because hey, if their upgrades work, then I might be changing my mind, but there's no reason to be talking about that right now, because we've seen some of their upgrades not work this season, so I wouldn't get behind the hype too much too early. But basically, the drivers are, again, Lewis Hamilton looks like the top dog. Again, he's still under that 25 million, and he's been getting a 1 million increase so often so far this season in the last few races. He's been in top form in Spa, he's been in top 4 in Hungary, he's been in top form in Silverstone. I really wish I could have him in my team. It's sad that I can't. And then you have Oscar Piastri and George Russell. I think they're in very similar positions. George Russell has just been extremely unlucky, and I do think his time will come where he gets you a lot of points. So I do recommend trying to fit in George Russell as well into your team. But it very much is a McLaren versus Mercedes thing, because Norris and Piastri both are great assets as well. And it really does just depend on their day who looks faster, McLaren or Mercedes, and then you go for either of them and put your 2 times on whoever looks better from them. But those are the 4 you really want to keep an eye on, and if I see them in your team, I'd be happy with that team. And then constructors wise, nothing much has changed. I still wouldn't go near any of the cheap constructors. And you've got, of course, my favourites, McLaren and Mercedes, because they're cheaper than Red Bull and they get you similar points. But again, it's a little bit of a risk to go for Red Bull, but hey, if Verstappen looks brilliant this weekend, it could be worth the risk. For me, no, but they're a very close third behind, where if I see teams with Red Bull, McLaren, and you're going for the single premium driver, I understand. I don't think it'll get you as many points, but it's still a decent option for a team if you want to try a differential. So the first team I want to talk about is what I have dubbed the points maximizer. So with this team, yes, you're still looking at a few budget options, because you have to look at a few budget options, but this is the team that you would choose if you just want to go all out attack and get as many points as possible. And for me, it has Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, K-Mag, Hulkenberg, Sargent, McLaren and Mercedes. It'll put you back 125.6 million. So yes, it's a very expensive team for the elite who can have that team value. I know a few people do have this sort of team value, but here's the good thing about it, because the cheap drivers don't matter as much as the big drivers. If you still want this point maximizing team, then all you would have to do is either drop K-Mag or Nico Hulkenberg, depending on how much you want. So Hulkenberg to Albon would then make this team 125 million. and K-Mag to Albon would make this team 122.6 million. So a lot more people could afford 122.6 million as their team. And this team, genuinely, there is nothing wrong with it. Yes, you won't get the budget points from Norris, but you'll get the budget from Hamilton, you get the budget from Mercedes, and you get the best amount of points from Norris and McLaren. And these drivers look like the best options of the bunch. Of course, then you keep Albon and Hulkenberg. You always have to sort of deal with Sargent, but hey-ho, that's how it goes when you have to get these big drivers in your team. Now, of course, the alternative is to go for something a little bit cheaper as well if you cannot afford this, which is something along the lines of what I will be using, which would basically be the exact same team, just replace Lewis Hamilton with George Russell, and this would set you back 122.2 million. And again, you can do the exact same thing where you could either replace Hulkenberg with Albon, or you could drop Kevin Magnussen to Albon. And again, this makes those teams so much more easier to use. If you drop Kevin Magnussen down, it only costs you 119.2 million, and you still have Albon, Hulkenberg, and Sargent all in that team. It's not a bad team. And then you also have the budget building teams that would look like this. Again, a very similar team, because this is the sort of teams that will be the meta from now on, but it's Piastri and Hamilton instead of the Norris potentially that you would normally have if you wanted to play it safe. And that's because both of these two have the biggest chances to increase their prices, but also they're not bad at getting the most points. Piastri's actually outperformed Norris in a lot of the last few races. It isn't actually a bad team points wise, and I'd still love to have a team like this. And if anyone does have this team, it's a brilliant team to have. And then again, I have to reiterate, it's 122.9 million. But if you replace Hulkenberg with Albon or Kevin Magnussen with Albon, it gets it down into the teens for team value. And that again is much more doable for a lot of other people. I know for me, I have about 119.5-ish million in the bank, and I would be able to use them if I drop some of the cheap drivers, which is probably what I'm going to be doing. Because guess what? You can even drop these teams further down if you need any more value. For instance, if you really wanted the Norris and Hamilton team, the points maximizer team that I was labeling as, and you really want them and you just want to go for the cheapest cheap drivers, this team would now cost you 119 million. And again, that's a team that I could afford. A lot of people could afford that. And then you also have the Norris and George Russell team. With these cheap drivers, it would only cost you 115.6 million. Again, a lot of people could use that. And then with the budget building team, this one would only set you back 116.3 million. Now, of course, it's not going to be the best teams because the cheap drivers will really hinder your performances, but it will be a lot better than what you could have had if you went for a single premium driver build, which is the only other really option you could use. So be mindful that you can use these teams, will still perform well, but you would really want to push up and try to change these drivers once you get a bit more money in the bank. And then team-wise, finally, I'm just going to quickly run through some of the cheap teams for anyone who's just starting out or for anyone who has less than 115 million in the bank. So first up, if you have 100 million and you're just starting out your F1 Fantasy season right now, then I would recommend going for a team like this with Russell, Albon, Zhou, Hulkenberg, Sargent, McLaren, Mercedes. The best sort of team to try increase your price, and it's the best team to still have one premium driver and two brilliant constructors in it. And then at 105 million, you get a team like this. Again, switching out Russell for Piastri, because Piastri seems to be a more of a balanced option, and then you bring in Tsunoda to upgrade from Albon, because you have that extra money and there's nowhere else that extra money could really go for now. And then at 110 million, you'd have a team like this. Again, another team that's sort of more focused around increasing budget. If you have less than 110 million at this stage of the season, you really want to just try and get your budget up, because you will be very far behind everyone else points wise no matter what happens. So it's all about getting that budget up, and you can do that with Kevin Magnussen and Hulkenberg. And if you have a little bit more money, you could increase Tsunoda up to an Ocon, but then it would be over 110 million. But this is a team for 110 million, and that is all of the teams wrapped up. So let's move on to the chips that you can use. So again, it's nice and simple with the chips this weekend, as Zandvoort is not a sprint race weekend, so I would recommend again not using any chips. Now, unless there's rain, we've seen last time there was rain, a lot of drama happened, then potentially no negative could be used. And again, final fix, it only should be used if something unexpected happens. Let's say you have a McLaren driver and they look terrible this weekend, and a Mercedes look much better, and you can just slip in that Mercedes driver. Go for it. It's sort of similar instance why we used it in Spa, because we knew, okay, I could keep my team the same, then bring in Verstappen, and it did work out. It was a good final fix to use. It could have worked out a little bit better, but it's that sort of thing you want to be saving final fix for. And again, sprint race weekends are always better with Limitless. extra DRS, autopilot, all of these options, as there's much more points on the cards for those weekends. Then finally, let's talk about my league, and thank you all so much for joining it. We almost have 850 people in it, and I have to say, this is the final weekend that the league code will be public. And this is because obviously there is the prize pool, so I don't really want anyone joining like the last weekend of the F1 season and then winning it, because there's been people in this league since the start of it, and I think that's a little bit just like, I don't think that's fun. So please join if you really want to join this league and fight for how far you can get up. I believe I'm about 108th at the minute, so pretty happy with where I am. But with 850 people, that's a pretty good position. And with how competitive it is as well, we've got a lot of top names in this league. And hey, let's give them a shout out. So of course, we have the one and only Leapers1. What an amazing season he is having right now. 3,489 points. I mean, just look at this guy. Every single weekend, he's getting banger after banger. Very well done to you, Leapers1. Then you got Colt Viet flat out in second place, 3,419. The last of the people in the 3,400. So well done, Colt Viet. There's a massive gap to Leapers1 at the minute now, though. But hey, we don't know what the chip situation is, so let's watch out for these fights going on at the front. Then Anema the G, well done for moving up to third place, although you are joint third with Bandsagging. So congratulations to both of you two for being in third place. And then in fifth place, we have #1Paddock, here I come. Oh my god, good to see you back in the top 5. Well done for moving up to fifth place again. So thank you all so much for watching. I generally hope you could get something out of this video. I will have my video about everything you need to know for the Dutch Grand Prix, which will be just more about F1 in general, out later this week. I will also have another video coming out after practice 1 and 2 for anyone who wants to know a little bit more about my thoughts after seeing the practice sessions. And of course, I'll be live on Saturday. Well, at least I'll try to be live, because a few things could happen. But if not, I will keep you all updated. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.